I'd like to first acknowledge an important and sacred place within Treaty 7 and the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi from the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai Nations, the Nakota, Bearspaw, and Wesley Nations, and the Dene of the Tsuut'ina Nation. A place called Mohkinstsis, simply meaning elbow, and what we know as Calgary today. Southern Alberta is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. My name is Nathan Woolridge, and I am a settler and a treaty person. For years, I have been carving out that identity and my role in truth and reconciliation. I was born in Newfoundland and Labrador, a space occupied by the Inuit, the Innu, and the Mi'kmaq. I remember my first exposure was learning about the Indigenous group who once lived in the area where I grew up, known as the Beothuk people, and learning about their extinction at the hands of European settlers. This was my first recollection of learning about the broken relationships, mistreatment, and genocide of Indigenous peoples in the land that I call Canada and to others known as Turtle Island. Later, when my family moved to northern Alberta, I was introduced to the Indigenous people of the Peace region. It was here that I witnessed the modern mistreatment and impact of intergenerational trauma against Indigenous peoples. It was difficult to watch my Indigenous friends struggle without ever being able to understand their pain and suffering. And on the other hand, it was a blessing to see so many of my Indigenous friends prosper, becoming parents, leaders, and using their connection to culture to make the world a better place. It's an example of why we need to acknowledge the truth of what has happened, but also why it's important that we reconcile, rebuild, and work towards healing and uplifting Indigenous communities. And lastly, in just a few short months, I've gotten to acknowledge a new side of Indigenous culture and people, the importance of the land. I've learned that it isn't enough to just acknowledge it. It's been the most shocking to me in how we take this land for granted and how we misuse and mistreat it. The land provides, and we often forget about our mutual relationship with it, constantly taking and never providing. In order to build a better relationship with Indigenous people, we must also work on a relationship with the land. In my own personal experience with land-based learning, I've come to understand that it's important to recognize the knowledge that is embedded within the land and that we need to listen to it in order to learn. The landscape is always changing, and we must too. Knowledge is about experiences. Knowledge comes from different places and is different to each and every one of us. And now, the history of this land is not just an Indigenous story, it's everyone's story now. That's why moving forward, it's important to not only recognize the land, but to also recognize the layers of cultural knowledge. This means to acknowledge the land, but also its layers of stories and people. In my future practice as a teacher, my hope is to teach students about their role in the land's historical, contextual, and accumulative landscape and history. I want to teach them how to be observant, to seek their own experiences with the land, to ask it permission, and to be respectful to and responsible for the land. To move forward means to be genuine in rebuilding relationships. Listen, learn, and engage. It's more than just words. It's about coming together through sharing experiences. I went to Mount Royal University in 2016 for my communications degree, and there I had the opportunity to interview people and kind of find this love of storytelling that I had. And a part of that was through just all of the interviews and experiences that I was having, and it was such a unique thing to be able to sit down and have conversations with people. And I did that through various mediums, through podcasting, through video, kind of like what I'm doing with this series. And part of that work that I was doing, a huge part of it was kind of discovering this importance of like land-based learning and Indigenous voice. As an alumni, once I found out that Mount Royal now has a Office of Indigenization and Decolonization, I was super intrigued to learn more about this really important space and the type of work that they're doing. And I thought for this series focusing on changing education, I wanted to step inside and see what they're doing and how maybe this can be replicated throughout other places and spaces in education. And just truly, what does indigenization and decolonization of education, what that really means? And maybe kind of look for a template of what that could look like in these types of settings. While at the Office of Indigenization and Decolonization, I encountered this word nitsui. The word apparently means the moment you know you belong. It is the moment when things start, when an idea pops into your head, and when you understand something. Nitsui is the beginning, and it is the very point of change. I thought that was really, really important heading into this journey. I became aware that there is a group who identify as the Indigenous Ecological Restoration Committee. So I joined them for tea and a discussion one day, and just was blown away by the learning that I encountered. They are working on several different initiatives that connect students, faculty, and nature. It is just such an incredible thing to witness.
All of this, like one little pod has got like a million of them.
These are the seeds that we have.
Yeah.
And if you break open a pod, it's these tiny, tiny, tiny little seeds.
See all of these here, these little.
That's a seed.
Yeah.
Each little
so
tiny
when
one?
you plant, you could plant a whole crop, like a couple of acres with this. Like
Yeah.
Wow.
Millions of them.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what we're going to do with
So
all
is
the
this,
seeds.
I can't remember, but was this the stuff that they were saying like was from Montana? Was
Yes.
a lot of the seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has to do
With their goal in mind of connecting people on campus with nature, they've been able to plant gardens, they've been able to plan for potential forests. There's just a lot of really cool, interesting initiatives happening. And I was really invested in the collaboration process and just how everyone is coming together to create these learning experiences. And I wanted to take the time to sit down with the people behind these initiatives and just learn a little bit about how this kind of initiative is working and how it could be replicated potentially.
So it actually came in a dream. And it's about 8 years ago, and I dreamt about having a forest on campus. And I dreamt about just this idea. Now I'm over in the phys ed wing, which is by the pond at Mount Royal, and so I look out on the pond, and there's these beautiful trees, and there's this little space that I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have this forested area that people could come into and interact in all the different ways that we can. And at the same time, it was when I was learning more and more about reconciliation and what it is to be an ally in that process. And so at first I just started talking to people about it, and I literally just talked to anyone who talked about, oh yeah, I like the grounds and I just started kind of throwing the idea out about having this forest on campus, and it really wasn't getting anywhere fast, but at least I thought, anytime I get a chance to talk to someone, I'm going to do it. With Linda's I'm going to say power, but I don't mean it like her position. I mean like just she came in and she added that final bit of momentum that we needed. And suddenly this has taken off. Then all of a sudden Grounds, which just kind of said, well, we've got a few areas, is like all in.
That's how small the seeds are.
Oh, so it's not this thing, it's this.
Each one of those little specks will be a plant. Wow. There's enough seeds in there to plant all of Alberta.
And literally it is just taken off. And every time I do anything, I have people who want to volunteer, people who say, someone else is trying to do this, do you think we could work together? We have people who want to bring their classes in and get the tobacco, like help us harvest the tobacco or plant it or care for it through something like that. I call it an octopus. And I kept saying it because it felt like that's what it was. And then I looked up octopus and discovered that octopuses have 9 brains. A central one and then one in each arm. And I'm like, oh, that's this. That's what this is. We've actually stopped calling it a project and we're just calling it Indigenous Ecological Restoration, because project makes it seems like it's just going to stop. And right now we are riding the wave of all the synergies, all the passion, all the ways that it just feels right for so many people. So that's where we've got to. Well, what I'd say, one of the big, we have kind of key things. So one is making sure that we're guided by elders. The other one is reciprocity. And so with our elders, we've also said to them, we offer tobacco, the proper protocol, but then we also say, is there anything else? Turns out through a friend of a friend, I know someone else who does a seed bank and has been doing it for years. And so one of our guiding principles is reciprocity. And so any of these moments that come up, and I will say they right now are just popping up all over the place. And always the discussion is, well, this is what we're doing. We'd love to have you involved. We very much want to make it educational. We've started to use the phrase curated experiences. Like a week ago, we came up with this phrase curated experiences, so it's not like it's been around forever. But not just taking people out like on a tour, like, oh, here's this plant, here's this, but we're going to go out and we're going to create an experience for you as part of this. And then, what is this relationship with the land? Why is it important? What do Indigenous people look at it? How do they look at it? And I think it just is community building, right? And you just start to see all the different types of communities that like to get involved. We've had health and phys ed wellness students that have come and we had them harvesting the corn as they do a mindfulness thing in their class. And so it was teaching them, well, you can be on the land and have this mindfulness experience. And so we taught them about the corn and the seeds and how we were taught to plant them and how we were taught to harvest them. And then we talked about, checking with your body. What does this feel like for you on the inside? And it feels like every group we bring, we have a different thing that we can highlight in the process, but then it is that way of building community between people, but also community with the land. And so I just see this in so many different ways. You've seen the people in the room there that are chatting away, so you create a community that way. You're creating this connection to land that maybe didn't exist the same way before. Maybe that has a ripple on how people treat the land, how people treat each other, how people even just think about thinking, right? Like the fact that we're in a university, right? This is the bastion of colonization knowledge. And having people to have that pause and go, oh, there could be a different way that I could look at this. There's different knowledge systems. There's different things that can go on. And so it's not just plants, right? It's everything else that goes along with it.
I had the opportunity to sit down with an elder, and she really gave me a lesson that I was not expecting. But when I realized what she was trying to tell me and what was happening, I was just blown away with the lessons that what she had really shared.
The interaction and the communication and being fully present and getting to know each other.
something like this in action, you're just like, wow, could you imagine if classrooms and schools and communities and stuff, they all look like this and people were communicating like this, it would just be, you know, very different. Yeah.
The form of communication. If you listen to the conversations that are going on, there's so many conversations going on around amongst each other, cross sections. Some are this being in the moment, connecting to the leaders. And then just sharing amongst each other. And look at all the communication going on.
Between the Office of Indigenization and Decolonization at Mount Royal and the group of people who are doing the incredible work of creating these spaces, I was personally really inspired by what everyone is doing as an act of truth and reconciliation, but also collaboration. And it's so cool to see that these spaces are being built so that people can connect with nature, but also with each other while on campus. And it sounds like through these initiatives, people from different faculties are coming together to connect. People are actually getting these learning experiences that are hands-on, but also very meaningful and connected to so many different things. So it's really cool for me as someone who's going to be working in education to see this in action and to see what the power of collaboration, but also good intentions and just really what that can do. So for me personally, it was super inspiring to sit down, meet the people behind this, and to learn a little bit more about what this looks like in action.